Welcome to the Explainer. You know that feeling when you hear an argument and it sounds logical, but something in your gut is just telling you, nope, something's off. Well, today we're going to become logical detectives. I'm going to give you the tools to spot a flawed argument by breaking down the two fundamental paths of all reasoning.
All right, so let's jump right in with a case. We're going to look at two arguments that, on the surface, seem to follow a pretty simple structure. But there's just something about them that doesn't quite add up. They might seem convincing at first, but our intuition just screams at us to be skeptical.
Okay, take a look at these two. On the left, we've got the Superman argument, which concludes that because people saw something flying, it had to be Superman. Then, on the right, the argument is that the Loch Ness Monster must be peaceful simply because it hasn't attacked anyone. They seem to connect the dots, but are those dots really connected? Both of these arguments kind of follow that simple A plus B equals C structure. So, what's the problem? Why do they feel so off? Well, to find the flaw, we need to open up our detective's toolkit and get to know the two basic paths of logic. Okay, let's dive into this. The two fundamental tools for building and analyzing pretty much any argument are deductive and inductive reasoning. These are the frameworks that all logical claims are built on, so understanding them, well, it's absolutely key. First up is deductive reasoning. The easiest way to think about this is top-down logic. You start with a big, general rule that you know for a fact is true, and you apply it to a specific situation. The result? A conclusion that is basically guaranteed. And the other path? That's inductive reasoning. And yep, it's the exact opposite. So think of it as bottom-up logic. You start with a bunch of specific observations or clues, and you try to build your way up to a broader general conclusion. So the crucial difference here is the direction of the logic. Deductive reasoning is like a funnel. It starts general and funnels down to a specific conclusion. Inductive reasoning is more like building something. It starts with specific pieces and builds up to a general theory.
Let's make this crystal clear with a super simple example. This is really going to highlight the power of deductive logic when it's done right.
So, check it out. We start with a general rule. Everyone on the team wears a helmet. Then we add a specific fact. Paul is on the team. Now, if both of those premises are true, the conclusion is absolutely 100% guaranteed Paul wears a helmet. Case closed.
See, this is a perfect example of deductive reasoning. It moves from that general rule about the whole team to a very specific, certain conclusion about one single player, Paul.
But what happens if we flip the evidence around? What if we don't already know the general rule? What if all we have is that specific observation about Paul, and we have to try to figure out the team's rules from there?
Now this is an inductive argument. We see specific evidence. Paul is on the team, and he's wearing a helmet, and we infer a possible general rule. But notice, we can't be certain, right? Maybe Paul just really likes wearing that helmet. It's a probable conclusion, but it's not a definite one.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. Just because an argument looks like it's following one of these paths, that doesn't make it correct. An argument can still be completely wrong. The secret is to check the premises, the very foundation the argument is built on. So, as a logical detective, you're looking for two main culprits. First, you've got fact issues. Is the information they're presenting actually true and verifiable? And second, you've got logic issues. Even if the premises are true, do they actually lead to the conclusion being made? So let's put this into practice and solve our first mystery. Remember that Superman argument? It tries to connect the dots between a flying creature and, well, Superman. And there it is, the flaw. It's a fact issue. The very first premise, that Superman is a creature that can fly, is presented like a solid fact, but it's completely unverifiable. We can't prove he exists, let alone that he's the only thing that could possibly be flying. The entire argument is built on logical quicksand. And what about our supposedly gentle monster in the lake? This argument takes the lack of attack reports and tries to make a huge claim about the monster's entire personality. And here, we've got a logic issue. The premises just don't support the claim. Just because something hasn't been reported to attack doesn't logically mean it's peaceful. For all we know, it could be shy, uninterested, or just waiting for the right moment. The logic just doesn't hold up. Now, what's really fascinating is the final clue that separates these two types of logic. It's often hidden right there in the language that's used to make the claim, and once you see it, it's a dead giveaway. Just look at the words. A valid deductive argument leads to certainty. It uses words like definitely, must, or is. A good inductive argument, on the other hand, deals in probability, so it'll use words like maybe, likely, or probably.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core difference in their power. If the premises are solid, a deductive argument provides absolute proof. An inductive argument, though, it provides strong evidence, but it always leaves a little room for doubt. One is a closed case, the other is a compelling theory.
So now you have the detective's toolkit. You can tell deductive from inductive reasoning, and you know the two main culprits of a bad argument: faulty facts and flawed logic. So let's try to apply this to a complex, real-world debate.
For example, take a deeply complex topic like animal testing. One side might make a deductive claim based on a general ethical rule. Another might use inductive reasoning, pointing to specific instances of medical advancement. To really judge the arguments, you have to carefully examine every single premise.
So when you hear someone argue about this, use your tools. When they state a premise, ask yourself, is that a verifiable fact or is it an assumption? And when they draw a conclusion, ask, is the logic truly deductive and certain, or is it inductive and merely possible? The answer tells you everything. That's your case to solve.